Most people think that they are stuck because of their circumstances, because they don't have money or time or the right opportunities, or maybe they don't know the right people and so on. But the truth is, you are not trapped by the world. You are trapped by something far more subtle, far more powerful. You are trapped by your fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of what others will think, fear of losing control, and for some, even the fear of success and their own greatness, and ultimately the fear of death itself. This is what is holding you back. And here is the truth that almost no one tells you, that fear is an illusion. It is unreal. It is the most powerful illusion the mind ever created. Fear is not something that exists outside of you. It is simply an absence of light. And that is what we will understand and discover today to eradicate fear forever. Not by fighting it, but by understanding what it is and where it is coming from. Now we will understand all this and we will understand the root of fear with this simple diagram and with the foundational understanding of Vedanta. Vedanta tells us that everything in its essence is consciousness. Even me and you, in essence, are not the body or the ego or the swabhava, but the consciousness itself. And this consciousness, that is light, has no beginning to it and has no end to it. It is neither born nor does it die. It is eternal, it is imperishable, it is the form of pure bliss and joy and fulfillment. So if this is the case, then why do we experience fear? Fear is not a real thing. It is not an entity that exists. It is simply the absence of faith. It is the absence of understanding. Now imagine that there is light everywhere. This entire page, the entire white background represents light and consciousness. And here there is an object which is symbolizing a person. And when a person stands in this light, he casts a shadow. Any object in light casts a shadow. What is this shadow? Is this shadow a real thing, or is it simply the absence of something? Shadow or darkness in this symbolism can be looked at as simply the absence of light or the apparent absence of light. So the entire white background is light, it is consciousness, and even this apparent shadow is also an appearance within that light just because of this object that is standing. Now here's how we can understand this. This represents I, the ego, the identity, and it represents a person. In this case, you. You are this ego, this identity right now. And behind this and beyond this and in and through all of this is that light, is consciousness. This is the primary doctrine of Vedanta. Now, as per Vedanta, this I itself, this ego itself is an illusion. It is not ultimately real. It is simply an assumption. You have simply assumed yourself to be an individual person that is separate from the rest of the universe. It is a false conclusion that you have come to without inquiry, without questioning. So, because you have assumed yourself to be this object, this individual person, you cast a shadow. The shadow is the consequence of the ego, the consequence of this primary assumption that we are an individual being. Now, this shadow represents fear. Fear is a consequence of ego, which ultimately is unreal, but it is apparently real since we have assumed it to be real and we are experiencing it. It is simply the absence of knowledge and wisdom. And once the Vedantic wisdom shines through this ego, and once we can assimilate this wisdom within us, then this ego vanishes. And once the ego vanishes, the fear, the shadow that it was casting will also vanish. And understand here that everything that you wish to do in this world, that ideal life that you wish to live in terms of good health and relationships, career and financial freedom, and living your full potential and living your purpose, if there is one major thing that is holding you back and is keeping you stuck, is fear. Fear of criticism, fear of failure, and all other fears that we discussed earlier. All of these types of fears ultimately ties back to the fear of death, which is tied to ego, this individual identity. To the degree to which we are identified with the ego, to that degree we suffer, and to that degree we experience fear. The more we detach from the ego and understand that we are the pure light which is eternal, the more we are free from suffering and ego. So, just to summarize before we move ahead, the white background represents light and consciousness, which is always there. Then there is this assumption that we are an individual being, that we are the ego, and this assumption, this object, casts a shadow. That shadow is fear, and that fear in turn gives rise to suffering of various kinds. So, the way to dissolve suffering and fear is not by fighting it, but it is simply by letting this light shine through us and dissolve this ego, dissolve our ignorance. Once this vanishes naturally. Once the object vanishes, the shadow vanishes naturally. And once fear begins to vanish in your life, what you will be able to do with your life, you can't even imagine yet. Because so many things keeps us stuck, right? Like when I was working as an architect and when I was deciding to transition from running a successful firm to starting an organization, that to a spiritual organization that I had no clue on how to go about. What kept me stuck for some time was fear. The fear of the unknown, the fear of what others will say, and the fear of failure. But what helped me ultimately to discover my potential more and more and to live my Swadharma, my purpose, is the wisdom of Vedanta, is the wisdom of light and consciousness. That is all it takes to dissolve fear. And now let's practically put it together and let us look at the two paths that we can take from this point in order to systematically overcome suffering and fear, in order to dissolve the ego and live as that pure consciousness more and more in our life. Fear is the absence of faith. Faith and fear can never go together. If you trust God, if you surrender to God, or if you can establish in your true self as that consciousness, then you can never be affected by fear. From today onwards, from this point onwards, begin to use fear as an indicator. Begin to look at fear as a tool. Whenever you're afraid, understand that you are going out of balance. You are moving away from God. Because think about this. If God is all powerful and He is all loving, and if He is with you, protecting you and guiding you, then why would you be fearful? How can fear have a place in your heart if there is faith in your heart? So the moment you recognize fear within yourself, take it as an indicator and align yourself with faith. Just understand that fear and faith can never go together. Fear is simply the absence of faith, and faith is simply the absence of fear. Whenever you are fearful, it's time to realign with God and surrender yourself to God. And to make all of this practical and to systematically remove this shadow that is fear and suffering from your life, there are two paths that we can choose from. The one is the path of a jnani, and second is a path of a bhakta. And we can also integrate both of these paths together. Let us briefly understand what these paths are, and you can choose whatever resonates with you the most. The path of Jnani is this. A Jnani is an intellectual seeker who is more interested in the understanding of the nature of reality and the nature of self, and he attains true freedom and he overcomes all forms of fear and suffering through this understanding alone. Basically, an intellectual seeker goes through a phase of learning and understanding the essence of reality through different dimensions, and he discovers how he is not the body since he is experiencing the body, and he is not the mind since he is witnessing the mind, but he is that eternal witness consciousness within, the light which is in and through everything. And once that understanding deepens within a seeker, he becomes a true jnani, a realized being who is established in his own infinite essence and his own infinite light, where the shadow disappears because the ego disappears. Now, this is one path. The other path, which is a much simple path and a path which is more practical for most of humanity, is the path of bhakti, of devotion. This is a place where we simply surrender ourselves to God, whatever it is, right? At ACS, we do not impose a deity to worship or a God to worship. So it's not about dogma, but it is about understanding the deeper essence of reality. Hinduism is about pluralism, where we understand that that infinite consciousness or God can be worshipped in different forms, in different ways. Although that ultimate reality is one, we can get to that through various means, and we can have a connection with that through various forms. That is why we worship so many deities in Sanatana Dharma. Not because we believe there are so many gods, but we believe that that one infinite power can be looked at and can be connected with in infinite ways. And that is why I've seen in many places where they worship Jesus Christ along with Shiva. So for a Sanatani, there is no contradiction because these are just forms which ultimately take us to that same infinite intelligence. So this is the path of a devotee or a bhakta, which is very simple, which is very emotional, where we surrender all our attachments to God, we surrender our fears to God, our suffering to God, and we surrender everything to God. And through that act of ultimate surrender, we surrender ourselves to God. We surrender this ego to God. And once this ego is truly surrendered, then obviously again the shadow vanishes, which means the fear and suffering vanish. So these are the two paths. And from today onwards, whatever path you choose, make sure to spend 10 to 15 minutes a day practicing this path. If you choose the path of the Jnani, then spend 10 to 15 minutes a day in meditation and in self-inquiry. Understand the Vedantic wisdom more and more, go deeper and deeper, meditate, contemplate on who you are, recognize for a fact that you are something beyond the body and mind. This will take you beyond fear. And if you choose to go with the path of a bhakta as a devotee, then begin to form a connection with a deity or God. Whatever that form is, it does not matter, but how you approach it matters. This should be a real connection, it should be a real relationship. For 10 to 15 minutes a day, sit in front of the God, the deity. Keep a form or a photograph of Krishna or Shiva or Jesus or whatever, and practice devotion. Literally speak to God, just like you would speak to your spouse or your child, and develop that love and connection and begin to surrender your attachments, your fears, and everything one by one to God. As you begin to practice this more and more, this becomes more and more real, and there will come a time when you will be ready to surrender everything. That is when the shadow vanishes. Both these paths are equally valid, and both these paths are encouraged in Vedanta. And the best thing to do, and what I do, is to practice both the paths. Why should we stop with one, right? If we can meditate and do self-inquiry and then practice devotion, then it's even better, because we are making use of all these paths and tools to our advantage for our evolution. So, choose whatever path resonates with you the most, or if you can, integrate both of them for your evolution. I hope this was valuable, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are actually finding value in our work.